Well, all of you know that Portugal once ruled Brazil. For nearly 3.5 centuries, Brazil remained under direct Portuguese rule. Yet Brazil is the fifth largest country in the world, almost 90 times larger than Portugal itself. So how did such a small country manage to rule a country as vast as Brazil? And how did Brazil eventually gain its independence? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out today. You've probably all heard of Christopher Columbus, one of history's most famous explorers. In 1492, he reached the Americas. His voyage completely changed the course of history. Soon after his discovery, the European powers rushed to explore and claim as many newly discovered lands as they could. During this period, Spain and Portugal reached a rather unusual agreement known as the Treaty of Tordesillas. They drew an imaginary line, roughly along the 46-degree west longitude. Spain declared that everything west of the line would belong to them, while Portugal claimed everything to the east. And just like that, they divided the Americas between themselves, as if the entire continent belonged to them. Anyway, let's get back to our main story. A Portuguese navigator named Pedro Álvares Cabral decided to sail to India in search of profitable opportunities in the spice trade. At the time, European nations were eager to reach India because spices were incredibly valuable. Cabral did set sail for India, but instead, he ended up somewhere completely different. That place is present-day Brazil. On April 22, 1500, Cabral landed at Terra de Santa Cruz, in what is now Brazil. When the Portuguese arrived, they realized there wasn't much they could take from this new land, except for one particular kind of tree. And this tree was quite fascinating. The heartwood had a bright red color, almost like glowing embers. The Portuguese called it brasa, a Portuguese word meaning ember. They harvested large quantities of these trees and shipped them straight to Europe, where they were sold for a handsome profit. A valuable red dye used for coloring cloth was extracted from the wood. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the name Brazil eventually came from this very word, brasa. Today, that tree is known as the Brazil wood tree. Brazil's coastline was covered with dense forests. These forests were home to native peoples such as the Tupi and the Guarani. At first, the Portuguese simply traded with these communities and rarely ventured far inland. But everything changed in 1530. The French had begun trying to enter the Brazil wood trade as well. In response, King John III of Portugal sent a Portuguese fleet directly to Brazil and brought the occupied territories under formal Portuguese rule. The native people didn't surrender without a fight, but they faced two enormous disadvantages. First, the Portuguese possessed firearms, guns and pistols that the natives simply couldn't match. Second, they brought with them diseases from Europe. These diseases devastated the indigenous population. As their numbers declined, the Portuguese gradually seized control of vast areas of land. They also brought Christian missionaries along with the sailors. Large numbers of native people were converted to Christianity and absorbed into the colonial system. In many ways, a silent genocide unfolded across the Portuguese-controlled territories. The Sugar Empire. It's quite an unusual name, isn't it? Yet that's exactly what Portuguese Brazil came to be known as. Do you know why? Because of sugar. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Portuguese established massive sugarcane plantations across northeastern Brazil. The business was incredibly profitable, but it also demanded an enormous workforce. To meet that demand, the Portuguese began transporting enslaved Africans to Brazil to work on the sugar plantations. I've explained this slave trade in detail in one of my previous videos. The northeastern regions of Pernambuco, Bahia, and Recife became the heart of Brazil's sugarcane industry. But as the saying goes, where there's sugar, the ants will eventually come. And in this case, those ants were the Dutch. Hoping to take control of this highly profitable sugar trade, the Dutch invaded Brazil. In 1630, they established their foothold in northeastern Brazil. But they couldn't hold on for very long. 24 years later, in 1654, Portugal drove the Dutch out of Brazil. The sugar trade had made Portugal incredibly wealthy. It had also made Brazil famous throughout the world. But in 1690, something even more exciting happened. Gold was discovered in Brazil. And just like that, thousands upon thousands of immigrants began pouring in from Europe. It was a massive wave of migration. Before long, diamonds were discovered as well. From that point on, Brazil's fortunes skyrocketed. And Portugal? It was making more money than ever before. But every golden age eventually comes to an end. The year was 1807. Dark clouds gathered over Europe. And do you know what those clouds were? They were Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon invaded and occupied Portugal. But King João VI of Portugal refused to surrender. Instead, he escaped to Brazil. From Brazil itself, he continued to rule the Portuguese Empire and established the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves. To be honest, this was an extraordinary moment in history. Before this, no European empire had ever ruled itself from one of its colonies. The homeland was always considered first class, while the colonies remained second class. But João VI completely turned that idea upside down. For the first time, Brazil was placed on equal status with Portugal. Napoleon lost power in 1815, and by 1820 Portugal had finally been freed from French control. João VI then returned to Portugal, but before leaving he left his son, Pedro, behind in Brazil as his representative. However, after João returned to Portugal, things changed once again. In 1821, Brazil was reduced to colonial status once more. In other words, all the prestige Brazil had gained was taken away. João also ordered Pedro to return to Portugal. But this time, things took a completely different turn. Prince Pedro refused. On September 7, 1822, near the banks of the Ipiranga River, Pedro made his famous declaration, "Independencia ou morte," independence or death. History remembers this moment as the Cry of Ipiranga. João didn't accept his son's decision so easily. A brief war followed and lasted for about 2 years. But the Portuguese forces sent from Europe were defeated by Pedro's supporters. Finally, in 1824, João accepted the reality. In simple terms, he said, "Fine, you keep your country. Brazil is independent." And that's how Brazil gained its independence. But the story doesn't end there. Brazil became independent as the Empire of Brazil. So when did it become the Republic of Brazil? And when did the monarchy finally come to an end? The answer lies in 2 major events. The first was the abolition of slavery in 1888. As you probably know, Brazil had brought more than 5 million enslaved Africans to the country over the centuries. In 1888, the Golden Law officially abolished slavery. Those enslaved people were finally free. They were no longer forced to work on plantations. And that decision triggered the second major event, the military coup of 1889. Now that enslaved labor was gone, many powerful plantation owners were furious with the emperor. Their anger soon turned into political action. In 1889, the Brazilian military overthrew the monarchy in a coup and proclaimed the Republic of Brazil. From that day on, Brazil entered a new chapter of its history. It gained a new identity and a new flag. The very same flag that you still see flying on streets, rooftops, balconies, and stadiums today. So that's the main story. It begins with Cabral's arrival in Brazil in 1500 and ends with the military coup of 1889, a journey spanning almost 4 centuries. Of course, many important events took place in Brazil after that, especially during the 2 world wars. But that's a story for another day. If you'd like to learn more fascinating historical stories and interesting facts like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll continue bringing you even better videos in the future. And if you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.